Weird West is a top-down, dark fantasy RPG gunslinger with beautiful art style and god-awful controls. My name's Eli with Rage Review, and this is the review of Weird West. Although this title is a Western shooter, it definitely earns the weird part of its name. The story starts off with Jane Bell, an ex-bounty hunter who's forced to hunt again after her husband is kidnapped and her home is destroyed by a very weird gang called the Stillwaters, who are secretly controlled by another strange and sinister group. That's about as deep as I'm going to get into the story because I don't want to spoil it for you, and I also have some issues that broke the immersion for me pretty early in the game, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Okay, so this is an in-edit note that I'm adding in right now in post. I'm going to stop playing this music right now because honestly, and it's no offense to the artist, it's not a great OST. I don't want you to listen to it. It's not very good. I'm going to talk about it later on in the review, but I'm just going to stop it now and play something better. So let's get on with the review. First off, I really want to praise the illustration art style in this title, as I found this to be the most satisfying part of the game. The art illustration lends itself to the comic book stylings, or better yet, the commercial printing techniques used in comic books from the 1950s and 60s called Ben-Day dots, which gives old comic books their iconic look and style. These dots were used in color comic books to create effects of shading and secondary colors to cut printing costs, as you would use small dots instead of coloring the entire area, thus saving ink and money. This style is all throughout Weird West illustrations, and you really won't get better creative illustrations in a game. It's absolutely top-notch. Now that we've talked about the illustrations, let's talk about the game style. Weird West has a very nice in-game style that reminds me of Borderlands, with characters having that thin black border around them, and the same can be said for most objects in the game. The overview map in Weird West is yet another incredible piece of art in my opinion. It's very much meant to replicate a board game. Even the areas you visit in the actual map, they have borders around them, and the way that your character moves around this map is also very board game-like. That brings me to map design. There's a lot to love here, but it's not without its flaws. The way they deal with objects getting in your way when you're panning around is great. Whenever something is in your way, whatever it is just magically disappears, and I quite like their approach to this problem. It's simple and it looks very good. One thing I didn't like is that I found that most areas seem to be carbon copies of each other with different inhabitants populating the area. Once you play for a few hours, you'll notice this as well. Another thing that bothered me was the lack of map when you're in a town. There's a mini map in the corner, which is better than nothing, I guess, but it could be much better, and it would make dealing with loot much faster if you could figure out which way you need to go. Let's get into some game mechanics. When you're being overwhelmed by the enemy, sometimes a friendly intervention will be triggered where a friend you met in the past comes to your aid. I actually really love this feature because there's characters in the game that I really like that come back to help you in your moment of need. And also, some of the times your posse is either aimlessly running around or not really helping at all. This changes deeper into the game when your posse grows to include better characters, but the AI is still super dumb at times. If they had implemented a command action to call your posse to your side, I think this wouldn't be as much of an issue. Next I want to talk about just real quickly is health regeneration. It's nicely thought out. Cactuses and buckets of water give you health, and when you're down and out with no first aids in sight, it's great to see a big bucket of water or a cactus. Another small aspect of Weird West that I really liked was grave robbing for loot. You can also bury bodies to come back and loot later if your inventory is full. And the tool they give you to help deal with all this loot is your trusty steed. The horse is not only a faster way of moving around the map, but it acts as another inventory for all of your loot. The music in Weird West can at times be very good, but for the most part, it's a droning beat type of thing that does absolutely nothing for me. Once in a while, the music will pick up and you really start to feel a great immersive experience flowing over you, only for it to suddenly cut out and go back to another background droning song. I'm an audiophile and a music nut, and I demand good music in games that I play. The way that I see it is, if you're going to put all this effort into making a video game, you'd think you'd want good music to further enhance the experience. And to the credit of most studios, they tend to deliver on having good music. Even really small studios can usually find someone to create a rock-solid soundtrack, and Weird West does not deliver in this aspect at all. Now we're going to talk about the loot. Oh, the loot. Managing your loot is excruciating, to the point where I didn't even want to collect that anymore, but you have to if you want to make extra money to buy better gear and supplies. If you're like me and you have to collect all the loot, like all of it, you will find storing it and selling it is a fucking massive pain in the ass. And there we go, I'm already out of inventory. It's like a constant struggle with the fucking inventory in this game, dude. You find more loot than you can store, and oftentimes when going into a new area, you will be full of loot before you can blink an eye, and then you have to walk back to your horse, fill it up with loot so that you can fit more important gear in your inventory while doing missions. This is where the lack of a town map gets very annoying, because you want to just deal with the loot as fast as you can because it's so painful, but the horse only stays on the outskirts of town. So you literally have to go from the outskirts of town and back to the general store to unload your loot, and back and forth, and keep doing that until you're empty. And then repeat this just many, many times. It would make it much faster if the horse could park in the middle of towns and you had a bigger map of the town. Also, in some areas, your horse doesn't appear, so you can't even load it with loot. This became very annoying as someone who can't bear leaving loot behind. This leads us to combat mechanics and controls. Shooting, dodging, and rolling is all standard in a top-down shooter like this. Using your bandages and elixirs are fine and well. Where Weird West loses it is in the ability to use your abilities. Using your abilities is without a doubt one of the most irritating control schemes I've ever experienced in a game in my entire gaming career, and I do not say this lightly. To use your shooting abilities when you're being overwhelmed by the enemy is literally a handful. I've never struggled to comprehend a control scheme so much in my life. Operating an excavator is easier to understand and get control of than these controls, and it's all because of a single button, the right bumper.
Big issues I'm having is to get to the special abilities for your gun, you have to hold left trigger to aim, and then right bumper to bring it up, and then you have to click on X or Y, B, A, whatever. And when you're like fighting and you're getting frantic, to go left trigger, right bumper, and then hit a button all while everything is going, it's way too much. It should just be left trigger and then another button. Just like for melee, it's right bumper and then another button. But for shooting, it's the left, the right, and then the button. And that extra button in the middle, it makes no sense, and it throws me off completely. It's throwing me off completely right now. It's wrecking the game for me 100%.
There's a reason why most games don't have this many modifier buttons to get to a single action, because it's fucking nonsense, and it completely breaks the immersion for me. Also, a wheel selector isn't a great option for selecting throwables. You have 2 slots for quick swapping weapons and no buttons to quickly throw dynamite. You can put a throwable into your quick slot, but you really need 2 guns there to survive. There's also a slow motion shooting feature, which every Western has, so I'm not going to talk about that whatsoever. I played Weird West for over 20 hours and I never got comfortable with the controls. I can literally remember every single button I need to press to manually start a Boeing 747 in Microsoft Flight Sim, which is a shitload of buttons, yet I struggled with Weird West controls. This is why I only got 20 hours into the game. Between the horrible loot management and the brutal controls, this game fully turned me off of it, and that is a damn shame because there's a lot to love about Weird West. Controls are our access point to being fully immersed into a game, and if done right, it becomes second nature and you don't even have to think about it. If done wrong, it's a game-breaking, immersion-ruining problem. These issues can be fixed, mind you. So while Weird West has incredible illustrations and style, a decent story, and great character design, it's held back by 2 massive issues for me that really just made me leave the game early: item management and control scheme. The controls just feel so unnatural in my hands, but that's just my opinion. Plenty of people seem to be enjoying Weird West. Not every game is for every person. So saying that, if Weird West looks like your type of game and it's in your wheelhouse, definitely try it out. If you're on the fence about it and aren't a huge fan of top-down shooters, I would definitely pass on this one. Well, that's it for the review, guys. Please like and subscribe for more weekly Game Pass reviews. My name is Eli with Rage Review. Take care, cowgirls.